Which is better, the Samsung Galaxy A13 or the Samsung Galaxy A23? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Now, both of these devices were recently launched in March of 2022, and they also are both 4G LTE only. Now, there is a Galaxy A13 5G, which is a very popular device, but it does have some differences from this phone, which is the 4G LTE only version of the phone. And then I'm not aware of there being a Galaxy A23 5G, but who knows, that could be coming out at some point this year, so we'll have to see. But with all that said, these two phones actually have quite a bit in common here, so this shouldn't be too complex of a comparison, considering that the two phones share many specifications. Now, both of these devices feature 6.6-inch displays and Corning Gorilla Glass 5 for the actual glass that's used on them. So that does make these displays pretty durable in general, which is certainly a really good thing. Now, the display technologies are also the same with both of these devices, and pretty much everything actually with the displays are the same. So they both have PLS LCD displays at 1080p. So really cool to see that even though these are both lower end devices from Samsung, they are both 1080p, as things do look really crisp and clear here. They have PPIs of 400. They both have 20:9 aspect ratios, so kind of a more narrow but taller form factor. That is pretty consistent with what we've seen from many higher end Android smartphones over the last several years. So I'm glad that they are 20:9. And they also both feature 83% screen to body ratios. So in general, pretty small bezels. However, they do both have slightly larger bottom bezels, and both phones do feature water drop notches up top. And with both devices, they both have 8 megapixel front-facing cameras. Now, as far as this whole form factor goes, with a thicker bottom bezel and then the water drop notch, we've seen this for quite a while now from Samsung with various devices that have come out over the years, but also many other companies that create Android phones also have been putting out phones with these designs as well. So these phones don't really bring too much new or different to the table here, but at the same time, they do both feature designs that are pretty practically minded. So if you are just looking for a phone that has a nice large canvas for watching video content or going on social media or for reading an article, for example, then both of these phones will be great for that. And especially with them being 1080p, if you want to read an ebook, for example, things are going to be nice and crisp and clear. And with them being 20:9, that actually makes them very ideal for social media, as since they are a bit more narrow and taller, you're going to be able to fit more of your feed into one frame here, which means that you're going to have to do less scrolling. So in general, Samsung did make some really good design choices with both of these devices. And I guess they made such good decisions that they figured that there's really no point in actually really giving us too many differences between the two, because they must have really settled on this particular design. Now, there are some differences when it comes to storage configurations. Now, the Galaxy A13 is offered in 32, 64, and 128 gigabytes. And I also know that in the US, they are selling this phone only with 32 gigs. So if you are looking to get this phone with 64 gigs, then you'll have to find one that's meant for another market. Now with the A23, this phone is offered in 64 and 128 gigabytes. So there is no 32 gigabyte model of it, at least as far as I'm aware. So typically, if you do end up going for an A23, you probably are going to end up getting a bit more storage with this phone. But both phones do fortunately feature microSD card expansion. So if you do want to offload photos and videos, for example, then you can do that here with these devices, which certainly does come in handy, as you probably will end up filling up your internal storage pretty quickly. Now, neither of these two devices feature wireless charging, but they do both feature fingerprints on the power buttons. So let's now give this a try with the A13. There we go, very quick. One more time. There we go. And then we'll give it a try with the A23. And it's also a very good fingerprint sensor. There we go, very fast and responsive. So I'm glad that these devices do give us side-mounted fingerprint sensors, as I feel like that placement is actually really convenient. Now, when it comes to the cameras on these devices, they actually both have the same camera configuration and specifications for the actual cameras themselves. So both phones feature 50 megapixel main cameras, 5 megapixel ultra wide angle cameras, then capture images at up to 123 degrees, 2 megapixel macro cameras for close-up images, and 2 megapixel depth sensing cameras. You can see though that the actual camera modules do feature a little bit of a different design. They do actually have the same layout for the actual cameras themselves, but there is a camera bump for the A23, whereas there really isn't one here for the A13. Now here's how things look on the camera apps on both devices. This is with the main camera. Now you can see going over to the More tab, we actually have a few more options available with the A23 in comparison to the A13. So essentially we're gaining slow motion and also night mode, whereas we don't have that here with the A13. But as mentioned earlier on in the video, both phones do have ultra wide cameras. They also both have macro cameras as well. So we'll go to the macro cameras. There we go. With that, we can get very close up. So certainly a pretty helpful feature to have there. We can also then flip around to the front facing cameras so we can take selfies with these phones. There's also group selfie options on both as well. And they also support portrait mode. So we have portrait mode for both the front and rear cameras, which is pretty nice. Now, unfortunately, video recording with both of these phones does max out at 1080p with the front and rear cameras. So there is no support for 4K video recording. Now, as far as RAM and processor go, with the A13, this device features 4 gigabytes of RAM, and it depends on which model of the A23 you get, but the RAM options with this phone range from 4 to 8 gigabytes. Now, this particular model of the device does have 4 gigs of RAM. So these two phones that are in my hands right now do have the same amount of RAM. However, one difference between these two phones is the processor that we are getting. This is probably the biggest difference between the devices in general and what would make you choose one over the other. Now with the Samsung Galaxy A13, we do have the Samsung Exynos 850 processor compared to the Qualcomm Snapdragon 680 with the Samsung Galaxy A23. Now I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests with both devices, and I'll show you the scores from those tests right now, but essentially I got, with the A13, a single core score of 148, and a multi-core score of 584, and we got much better scores here with the Galaxy A23 with 351 for the single core and 1645 with the multi-core. Almost double the scores here with this device, so you should definitely expect to get way better performance with the A23 compared to the A13. So again, that's really the biggest differentiating factor between these two devices. And I will tell you, from my experience of using these phones, that does make a big difference. This phone, without a doubt, performs way better than the A13. So you can certainly get by with the A13 if you're not expecting to do a whole lot with your smartphone. But if you are someone that does want to get a decent amount of usage out of your device doing a variety of different things, then you probably will definitely have a much better experience with the A23 due to it being quite a bit more powerful. Now, another difference between these two phones is NFC. So NFC is used for mobile contactless payments. There is no NFC with the Galaxy A13, whereas there is NFC with the Galaxy A23. Now, if that's a feature that you currently don't use and you don't see yourself using that anytime soon, then maybe it's not really a big deal between these two devices. But I know for me personally, I really like to make tap and pay payments with my device at any time that I can, especially assuming that I'm using a phone that actually offers that feature. So I definitely like that we have NFC with the A23, and honestly, that factor alone would probably make me pick the A23 over the A13. Now, both phones do have 5,000 milliamp hour internal batteries, so a lot of battery capacity, which is great, and they're both running Android 12 with Samsung's One UI 4.1. So we are getting the latest and greatest software from Samsung. But let's now take a closer look at the hardware of these two phones. They do have many similarities. Of course, I already talked about the front panels here. We have pretty much the same specifications for the displays. Now taking a look at the left side of both phones, we have the slot for the micro SD card and SIM card. Then on the right side, both phones have volume up, volume down, and also the power button, which doubles as the fingerprint sensor. Then up top here, both phones have noise canceling microphones. And then on the bottom of both phones, we have 3.5mm headphone jacks, microphones, USB-C ports, and both phones do feature speakers on the bottom. And then on the back of both phones, we have the Samsung logos, and then the camera modules, but that's about it. And you can see that both phones are made completely out of plastic, besides of course the front panels, and they do actually pick up some fingerprints. So you can't see a whole lot right now, thanks to it being kind of this light blue color, but they do feature glossy backs, and glossy backs do absorb fingerprints, so they will show up. And in general, I actually recommend using cases with these devices because I'm not really sure how this plastic is going to hold up over time, so it certainly wouldn't hurt to better protect your phone. But this concludes my comparison of the Samsung Galaxy A13 versus the Samsung Galaxy A23. As you probably noticed in this video, these two phones really have a lot in common. There really isn't a whole lot different about them. Really the biggest difference is the processor that we're getting, and certainly when it comes to that, the A23 is a much better choice. So at this point, it really comes down to price for which one you should go with, and that really depends on what the current offer is at the time that you're watching this video, as I don't know, you could be watching this 6 months from when I put out the video, or you might be watching it right when the video is dropping. So it really depends. But if you find these phones to be pretty similar in price, then I would definitely pay at least a little bit of a premium to go for the A23, mostly due to that more powerful processor. But I hope you enjoyed my comparison of these two phones. Definitely let me know what you think in the comment section below. But this is Kevin here, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and have a great rest of your day.